Well, this is Shelley, and very glad to, in a virtual way, see all of you here. I'm a assistive technology consultant. I specialize in learning differences and executive function challenges, and just a very little bit on this next slide. So I'm on the second slide called About Technology to Unlock Potential, which is it's the name of my consulting firm. And like I said, I work with learning and executive function challenges, provide a number of different AT services, from assessment to training, technical support, and implementing it, making sure it actually happens at school, and of course offering classes and workshops like what we're doing today. I provide all services on site through, essentially I travel to the school or home, so throughout the Bay Area, and I also collaborate a lot with schools to help them get technology and get up to speed. Okay, so next slide is just kind of an intriguing observation about students being, you hear that term, digital natives. If you think about the fact that any students who were born in the 1980s have never known a world without computers. I have this wonderful picture of my daughter at 1.5 years old lying on the carpet and playing with my first computer, an Apple II Plus. Students born in the 90s, they've never known a world without the internet. The internet has always been there. For students born after 2000, the world has always had mobile devices, and for students born in the last few years, they will never know a world without cloud computing or digital text, ebooks and such, and perhaps a few other things that we don't even know about yet. So students are immersed in the type of technology which, interestingly, are the very tools that can help assist with learning and executive function challenges. So next slide, internal and external learning tools. This is just kind of an interesting perspective that I have as to what is the purpose, why do we even want to use technology to address learning differences? The graphic at the top shows a desired level of performance, and the student's current level of performance is somewhat below that. And by the way, for those of you out there who are professional educators and stuff, I'm vastly simplifying this, so I apologize for that. But there's essentially two different approaches we can take to close that performance gap. The first one is instructional intervention, so essentially instructional remediation to improve the students' inherent skills and abilities. And I like to think of those as the students' internal tools that they apply to any task that they do. And then there's compensatory intervention, which is where you're compensating by modifying the task, maybe reduced problem set or extended time. You're adapting the environment, like taking a test in a silent room, or you're augmenting the student's internal abilities with assistive technology. So those become the external tools. Right, next slide. So the goals for the technology is we want to choose technology that helps to complement that internal tool set. And we're not just doing it to reduce the impact of difficulties the student might have, but also to leverage their strengths. So like when I look at what sort of tools do I want to use for a student, that's one of the first things I look at. What are the things the student does exceptionally well? How can we use technology to leverage that? As an example, someone who has great difficulty expressing themselves through typing or handwriting, but may have no problem doing that verbally. Gee, can we make use of speech recognition software? So the best place to start is, let's take a look at the tools that we already have, or that the people involved already have. What are the tools that most people already have? You don't have to go out and buy them. You don't have to learn something new. What tools does everybody pretty much already have? Well, if you have a computer or a mobile device, it has an operating system, the main two being the Windows and Mac operating systems. Most people are going to have either Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, or they're going to have Apple iWork, which has Pages, Keynote, and Excel. So basically, you're going to have a word processor. You will probably have an internet browser. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't be viewing this unless probably you were online in an internet browser. Mobile devices are so common now, and this is not just iDevices like iPhone, iPod Touch, iPad, but also Android devices, Kindle e-readers, and such like that. Almost everybody has Adobe Reader, the free PDF reader, and some people may even have Adobe Acrobat, which is the non-free version, but as you'll see later, we'll do something interesting with that. And then, of course, you have access to whatever you can get through electronics and office supply stores. So, next slide is, so what are some good reasons for pursuing what I've coined here, everyday tech? Well, for one thing, it's inexpensive because you already have it. There may be less resistance to using it because it's the sort of technology that everybody has. It's also, if it's something you're already using, it's familiar, it may be less intimidating. It's also easier to learn. You may already know most of it. I mean, I'm going to show you some things with Microsoft Word today that you may not know, but you basically would probably know the rest of the Microsoft Word interface. And because you already have it, you can get started immediately. One of the most intriguing reasons, though, is what I call the foot in the door, which is the fact that people who might be resistant to using technology to address learning and executive function issues, there may be less resistance to using something that that you already have. And once you see the benefits from that, that can be an enticement to explore much more robust technology tools. So the next two slides, I'm just giving, this is just a really basic summary of strategies for leveraging everyday technology. So first, remember what's on your computer or device. I mean, every device has an operating system, be it the Mac OS or Windows or iOS for the iDevices, your Android operating system. There's all sorts of capabilities that are built into that, and we'll touch on a few today, but believe me, we're just going to touch the tip of those. Know the basics of Microsoft Word or Apple Pages, whatever word processor you're using, and then also Adobe Reader. Take a look at the other technology you're using and see how you can repurpose it, such as a mobile phone or a camera. If you do have a smart device, rather than just a regular cell phone, but a smartphone, or if you have a mobile device like an iPad or a Kindle, take a look at and really understand what you can do with that. The second page with the strategies, most browsers, and this is becoming, there's a lot more extensions available for most browsers now. They're called extensions and add-ons, and they add capabilities to your internet browser. There's also web-based tools and resources that you can access. And for those students or for parents who are listening and wondering about what the school has, I would suggest checking with the school and finding out what technology do they already use. I mean, if they're using interactive whiteboards, that can provide some capabilities that you might not otherwise have. So even though you don't have them, the school already has them. Okay, so on this next slide is a graphic, a very crudely drawn submerged iceberg. And I just want to remind everybody that we're just going to really be touching the tip of the iceberg here. The tools that we covered today are just a very, very small percentage of all the tools that are available. As a matter of fact, if this graphic were correct, that would imply we're going to hit 1/9 of all the tools, and that's not even remotely close. It's probably like less than 1%. So I just want to remind you, I'm just going to hit some high points and some interesting or intriguing technology that you may not know about that's buried in the technology you already have. And if you want to learn more, you can go visit my website or also a number of other websites out there. but that's a place to start. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that there is so much stuff to cover here. I knew that everybody was going to get, as a matter of fact, Shannon is going to, at the end of this presentation, Shannon's going to push out a handout, which is a copy of the slides to everybody. And so there's a lot more information on those slides than we're going to cover today. But I wanted you to have that for reference. So I'll point out what's on the slides, but we're certainly not going to cover everything that's there. So I just wanted to make that clear. All right. So as a framework for looking at all these technologies, what I've done is I've grouped them into 5 different learning areas, and I've done them by students. So I have 5 example students named Annie, Lucas, Leah, Ben, and Hans. And I suppose if I had a 6th student, I could call him Chewbacca. Annie's in grade 5, has an issue with reading. Lucas is in grade 6. He struggles with writing. Leah is having problems taking notes in grade 8. Ben struggles with math notation problems in grade 9. And Hans has a number of different executive function challenges like attention and organization. So let's go through these students here. So this slide is just a little picture of Annie, and she says, I can listen a lot faster than I can read. All right, and this is quite common with kids with dyslexia and a number of other issues like that. Okay, I just went to the next slide, by the way, for those who, I know that there's a ding that happens for those people who are mainly just listening to the slides here. So I'm now on the slide, it's, what is this, slide 16, which is Annie and reading. I'm going to use this framework and a framework that I'll show you on the next slide for each of these 5 students. So the first slide for each student is a 2-column, 3-row table. First column just lists strengths, difficulties, and strategies for each student, and then the second column has those strengths, difficulties, and strategies. So Annie has very good verbal comprehension and reasoning, but she decodes printed text very slowly, occasionally leaves words out or misses them. She has difficulty visually tracking, especially long lines of text. She has a limited vocabulary. And she's currently 2 grade reading levels behind, and the effort she puts into reading really compromises her comprehension and retention, and she's really starting to get discouraged. So what are some basic strategies we could use? All right, and well, there are 3 different aspects to reading that I want to address on the following slides. And the first one is the visual experience of reading. You know, what does the text look like? The second one is how can we supplement that visual text with audio? And the next group would be on comprehending and taking notes from that text. So this next slide is I tried to break this up into 2 slides, but it really makes more sense to stick it in one 3-column table. All right, so this is a table comparing the 2 main alternatives to print text, which is audiobooks, which is an audio recording of a human reader, and electronic text, which is the computer software reading essentially digital text, and digital text being like what you'd have in Microsoft Word or on a web page. For each of those 2 categories, I have a description, what are the pros and cons, and what are the sources for what are the best sources for textbooks in the K-12 arena. So as I mentioned, audiobooks, you're just listening to a person reading, all right? Electronic text is the digital text, and you use the computer to read it to you. So the voices that are used, the computer voices, may be a little harder to understand because they don't have the natural inflection, intonation, and expression in normal human speech. But on the flip side, with the audiobook, all you're getting is the audio. You're not getting any text. On the electronic text side, you get to both see and hear the text, and we can do things with that text, like have the words highlighted as they're being read, or you can highlight that text and take notes, stuff like that. So those are probably the two basic categories you'll be working with. And I'm going to show you an example here. So I'm going to go to what's called app sharing in Blackboard. So we'll see how this works out. And I'm going to be showing you my iPad. So let's see, we're going to go to Reflector. And Shannon, you can tell me if you are seeing what you think we should be seeing there. Is this correct? Shannon?
Yes, can you hear me?
All right, I'm not. Yeah, I was thinking you can see my iPad
yes,
there?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see your iPad.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was showing up properly. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, just to show you a comparison of what you're getting with each of those options. This is Learning Ally, and this is, I'm going to be...
Emerald City of Oz.
Hold on. So what I'm doing is I'm listening to Chapter 11 in The Wizard of Oz. And again, all you're seeing is the page numbers and hearing it, but you actually can hear a person's voice reading the text.
Even with eyes protected by the green spectacles Dorothy and her friends wore, at first dazzled by the brilliancy of the wonderful city. The streets were lined with beautiful houses, all built of green marble and studded everywhere with sparkling emeralds.
All right, so I'm going to put that on pause. And a few things, you can speed it up, you can slow it down. Well, actually, you can change the pitch of the voice too, which is kind of interesting for the Learning Ally app. All right, so now I'm going to go to Read2Go, which is an app made by Bookshare, which is one of the major distributors for the K-12 arena of digital text. And let's go to...
The Wizard of Oz is Frank Baum. Book the Tale.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead.
A penny book.
And this is the same chapter.
11. The Wonderful City of Oz. Even with eyes protected by the green spectacles, Dorothy and her friends were at first dazzled by the brilliancy of the wonderful city. The streets were long.
Okay, so you get the gist of the two different, and I'm going to see here, I got to switch back off of app sharing, so hold on a second. Let's see, I got to remember how to do this. All right, so now we're back to, just confirm, Shannon, we're back at the slides again, right? So, okay. So anyway, so that, you know, that shows you the difference between the two completely different reading experiences. It would be really nice if we could do both reading experiences at the same time. In other words, to hear the person reading while seeing the text and seeing the words highlighted. Hold on, I'm just getting a different slide here. Okay, so right now I'm looking at, you know, so what can we do to change the visual appearance of the text? This is a 2x2 table here, and again, I use the same format throughout the presentation, where it lists everyday technology to consider on top, and then more robust assistive technology on the bottom. So, you know, typically what what might be recommended for a student is a high-end literacy and learning software which combines a number of those capabilities that you saw there of hearing the text read aloud, seeing the text highlighted, maybe highlighting the text to take notes. But what can we do with the technology we already have? Well, one thing we can do is we can obtain the e-text from Bookshare, and there is a way, which I show a couple of slides from here, to take that text and to copy it into Word or Pages. All right, so that now, once you're in Word and Pages, you can adjust the format of the text there. And I also want to point out that e-readers such as iBooks on the iPad, Kindles, Nooks, and stuff have a number of visual tracking and annotation capabilities as well, and we'll see some of those a bit later here. All right, So this is this next slide, adjusting text appearance in Word, just shows the different things that you can adjust in Microsoft Word. So the first thing is probably the font. The sans serif font is often easier to read. There's a couple of arguably easier to read fonts for people with dyslexia. You'll see these pointed out in various blogs. There's one called Dyslexie, one called Open Dyslexic, which are very similar. The jury is out as to whether those really improve the accuracy, but you're welcome to try them. You can certainly change the text. Once you get the text into Microsoft Word, you can change the text size, you can increase the line spacing, you can reduce the column width, and you can also change the colors of the text. And for many students, the idea of black text on a kind of a very light tan background, almost like these slides here, is easier. I'm going to go to the next slide. I think I'm going to the next slide. There we go, which is kind of a close-up of, on the left side, you're looking at text that you might lift directly from what you download from Bookshare, which is Times New Roman, very densely packed text. And all I've done is, by putting it into Word, I've changed it to much narrower columns that are easier to visually track. I've changed the font, the colors, a number of different things like that. And but you can do that right within Microsoft Word. All right, next slide. These are taking a long time to change. So this is just a basic summary, and you can, when you get your handout, you can refer to this later. It's kind of a 2 or 3 step process for taking text from Bookshare and putting it into either Word or Apple Pages. Is inside the book folder you download from Bookshare, there's a file with what's called an XML extension. You're essentially duplicating this, changing it to HTML, and then you just open that in your browser. And once it's in your browser, then you can copy and paste it to Microsoft Word or Pages. Please keep in mind, and this is very important, and that's why I wrote it at the bottom of the slide here, that in order to get books from Bookshare, copyrighted books from Bookshare, or for that matter the audio books from Learning Ally, you have to be eligible under certain parts of U.S. copyright law. So the only reason you have access to that is because you are eligible, all right? And that restriction still applies even if you're dumping it in Microsoft Word. In other words, you can't take that document and share it with somebody else. It's still only for your use. And I just wanted to point that out because it's kind of like a really important point. I see a question on the side that says, is there no DRM on these files? You can do what I suggested with it, but keep in mind that there is encoded into the material is identifying information so that if it did get out in the wild, they could figure out where it came from. So read through your Bookshare user agreement, and you'll see more about that. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, we can supplement that text with audio, and another question on the side about fair use copyright law. I'm not sure about that. We'll have to save that till later. So anyway, the next slide here, supplementing the text with audio. Again, another one of these 2x2 tables with everyday text listed on the top. Is probably the easiest way is to listen to an audiobook while you're following along in the print book. I have several students who will just listen to their audiobook on the Learning Ally app on their iPhone, have their headphones in, they're just following along in the book. You can use text-to-speech on the Mac or the speech function, which is built into Microsoft Word on the PC. I won't go into details to how to access that right now in the interest of time, but the capability is there, so you can just get that text in Microsoft Word or Pages to read aloud. If you're reading a PDF, and it's a text PDF, not a graphic PDF, Adobe Reader has a read out loud option. We've already talked about the Bookshare apps. Read2Go for the iDevices. They also have one called GoRead for Android devices. Google Play books on Android, you can use text-to-speech. There's a few other options there that I've listed. You can set your iOS device, your iPad, iPhone, or whatever, for at least the later operating systems, to just speak selected text. So I can just select the text and say, read this aloud to me, and it will read. So here's a kind of a unique thing that you're only going to find on one device. This is the Kindle Fire Immersion Reading, all right? And remember what I mentioned before about, okay, so on the audio books, you're listening to a person, but you're not seeing the text. On the digital text, you're seeing it, you're seeing the words highlighted, but you're listening to a computer reading. Well, on the later model Kindle Fires, they have a feature called Immersion Reading. It only applies to, I think they have 30,000 books converted. And the reason this is possible, what they're able to do here, is that Amazon bought Audible.com, the purveyor of audiobooks, back in 2008. So what they've done is, if you buy the Kindle ebook, the e-text, and also if it's available by the Audible audiobook, you can actually use them both together at the same time, and you can see the words being highlighted as an actual person is reading. And again, it's only available for about 30,000 books right now, but they keep adding to that. So it's pretty cool. You have to have a second generation Kindle Fire to do that, and if you already have one, hey, try it out. So here's an interesting little gem that's buried in the Mac operating system and also into earlier versions of Microsoft Word. It's called Auto Summarize, or just Summarize on the Mac. So let's say you're confronted with a large amount of text you have to read, all right? And you don't want to read through the whole thing. You're not even sure that it's worthwhile reading. What you can do is you can select that text, for instance, on a web page, select that text, and then I'm going to be talking about the Mac version of this. You go up to the Summarize feature, which is under the name of the app, and then Services, and then you pick Summarize, and it will give you a window, and I probably ought to use Blackboard's little arrow tool over here so I can point to things. Never even thought of that. So what it'll do is it will present you with a little window, which I've shown here at lower right, that cuts down the sentences in that text to, let's say, only the 20% that are most important. It actually uses a very interesting language processing algorithm that will just hit the high points. So why would you want to do this? Well, for one thing, if you're in a hurry, it gives you less to read. Another thing is you might just want to skim the article and just see, is it even worthwhile reading? So the example I show here says, Apple's iOS 7 set to drop on Wednesday, what to know? Well, I don't want to read the whole thing. What do I need to know? And in the summary, I summarized it in this example here down to about 20%. I can figure out, oh, it tells me a little bit about the updates, it tells me how to update, and it tells me whether I should download immediately. That sounds like a good article. So now I've set up a mental framework for what to expect from that article, and now I'll read the whole article. Okay, so highlighting, annotating, and extracting text. So, reading is only the first part. What do you do about taking notes from that text? Again, on the, for the main assistive technology, you might go to a high-end literacy and learning software like Kurzweil 3000 or Read and Write Gold, and there's a number of other tools that you can use. But how can I highlight and annotate and extract text just using what I have now? Well, perhaps the easiest way is stickies, colored highlighters, and a 4-color pen. And I have a lot of students who are very hands-on, they're very tactile, visual learners, and the idea of them physically interacting with those utensils makes a huge difference to them. So I want to make sure that we're not ruling out, when we're talking about technology, that we're not ruling out the really simple low-tech, no-tech stuff. If you have your text in Microsoft Word or in Pages, There's a feature that is typically used for, like if you're collaborating with somebody to edit text, it's called Track Changes. And if you turn on Track Changes, you can highlight sections, add comments, take notes, and those things are listed off to the side. And it's a really handy tool for taking notes because of one very interesting feature. You can turn off the Track Changes feature. So in other words, all your highlighting and all your notes disappear, and then you can turn them back on again. So it's a really cool tool. The other thing, though, is on the next couple of slides here, I'm going to show both ends of the spectrum, which is the low-tech with the physical highlighters and the high-tech using Kurzweil. And then I'm going to go to kind of an in-between thing of what I can do with the annotation tools built into iBooks. So this slide just shows low-tech but effective annotation. And again, for some students, the idea of a colored highlighter, sticky notes, and a 4-color pen is just fine. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the really extensive tools that are built into stuff like Kurzweil 3000, Read and Write Gold, Don Johnson's Solo, and other stuff like that. But what can we do with the iBooks app? Well, it turns out that it has some pretty sophisticated annotation features, and probably the best thing for me to do is I'm just going to show you some of those here. So I'm going to switch over to iBooks. So hold on a second while I go to app sharing. I've got to stop sharing on one app and then start sharing on something else. All right. Okay, so you're looking at, this is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz again. I happen to like that book. So I could go to my page in here on chapter 11 where this Emerald City is first described. I'm going to go back to the table of contents, and you'll notice in the upper right there's a thing that says Notes. Well, I've taken a bunch of highlighted notes, and those notes are all summarized in the in this section called Notes. So you'll see not only the text I highlighted, but also notes that I added. All right, and then in the upper right there's a thing that says Export, and when I pull that down, I can share those notes. I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly here. I'm going to select all my notes and then say send them to myself via email. So here's an email with all my notes on it. So I've just extracted all my annotations, and I can let me just delete that draft there. All right, so now we're going to go back on to application. Let me see, view whiteboard. So now I'm going back to the slide presentation again. So that's something to check out, and if you have an iPad, you already have it. So let's quickly move on because I see we're already at 4:12 here, and we do want to finish up at 5. Let's move on to Lucas and writing. So Lucas says, I can do well when I talk about my ideas, but not when I write them down. So again, I'm going to look in this 2-column, 3-row table. I'm going to look at Lucas's strengths, his difficulties, and what are some strategies we can do for him. So he articulates himself very well verbally, he even speaks in complete sentences. He's also a very good visual spatial thinker, but he has difficulties just getting the ideas out of his head in the first place and organizing those ideas. He has problems with spelling and grammar. He occasionally misses words or leaves them out when he's writing. Even though he has a really good vocabulary, it's difficult for him to retrieve words, all right? And then he also has poor penmanship. Now, the sort of thing that we might do if we were just looking at, standard assistive technology stuff, the sort of thing we might do for Lucas is to, actually, let's go on to, we'll look at the different aspects of writing here. So we're going to look at the motor aspects of writing, the composition aspects of writing, and then the mechanics aspects of writing. Mechanics being spelling, grammar, word choice, and such like that. So I'll do that on the next slides here. Okay, so this slide is writing motor aspects. Again, my 2x2 table with everyday tech listed at the top. If you think the student might benefit from having adapted pencils or grips, I would suggest checking, with an OT about that. They would probably be more skilled at making recommendations about that. Autocorrect. Microsoft Word has a feature in it called autocorrect. You may notice that if you type in Word and you type, instead of THE for the, if you accidentally type TEH, it'll automatically correct it. Well, how does that happen? Well, it turns out it's the buried deep within the settings autocorrect feature that has certain words built in. It says, like if you spell about with two T's, with two B's, it knows enough to correct that. Well, you can also enter your own words. So for instance, you could enter equals and write down your initials and say that every time I type equals with my first and last initials, it's going to automatically convert that to my full written out name. So you can create your own text macros, and it can sometimes speed up writing for things that you type frequently. On the Mac, for most programs, not all, if you're stumped on how to spell a word, for instance, let's say I don't know if it's separate or separate with an A or an E, I could type SEP and hit the escape key, and it will bring up a drop-down menu with all words in its dictionary that start with SEP. And I would recognize the correct spelling and go ahead and use it. But it's just a really handy feature that is built into the Mac. The one thing it won't work with is Microsoft Word, interestingly. But it will work with Pages. I'm going to get to in the next slide talking about annotating PDFs, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about making sure you understand the basics of speech recognition. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so worksheets are kind of the bane of some students' existence in school, is that you hand them a worksheet and, you know, I can't write that small, I can't fit it in the space, I write very slowly, isn't there any way I could just type this? Well, perhaps the easiest way to do that is to type directly on a PDF copy of the worksheet. If you have a Mac, you would use the Preview program, which is actually built into the Mac operating system. If you're on Windows, there's a number of different free third-party PDF annotation software like PDF Exchange Viewer, Foxit Reader, and a few others. You can go to my website and I have those listed. But the diagram I showed toward the top there is, this is the toolbar you see for Preview. This icon over here on the right-hand side will give you a drop-down for highlighting, and this one will allow you to draw squares, do circles, write your own text. But it's a way for a student to type and, let's say, respond to an in-class quiz. Teacher gives them a PDF copy, and they just type on it, save it, you know, give it back to the teacher. Now here's another interesting feature that's built into, and Rosemary, I'm going to need you for the video here. So is for adding annotations, voice annotations, essentially adding a voice response to a PDF in Adobe Reader. Elephants can weigh up to 14,000 pounds. Essentially what it is Adobe Reader, which is the free version, has built into it only two different annotation features, which I'll point to on the bottom of the screen here. You can add comments and you can highlight text, and that's all you can do. However, if you take that same document and do a very simple step, you open it in a copy of Adobe Acrobat or Acrobat Pro, and just turn on the feature called Enable for Commenting. What happens is then you resave the document. Now when it's opened up in Adobe Reader, suddenly these other annotation icons show up, one of which is Add a Voice Note. So a student could technically do a vocal response to a worksheet, store their voice on the Adobe, the PDF file, and then save it and turn it back to the teacher. So now I have a voice response to a written worksheet, which I think is also pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is, without a doubt, the busiest looking slide of the presentation, and I apologize for that, but again, it was important to kind of see the information here in the context of the other information. What I'm doing here, this is a 3-column table. Columns 2 and 3 are comparing standalone speech-to-text, speech recognition, with online speech-to-text. All right, and for each of those 2 options, I'm going to talk about how it works, what are some examples, programs that do that, what are the pros and cons, and then the last one is just a single item on stuff that applies to both. So it's important to understand the difference between standalone speech-to-text and online speech-to-text. Standalone are programs like Dragon Dictate for the Mac or Dragon Naturally Speaking, where the program resides on the device. It resides on your computer, and even if you're offline, you can still use it. And as a result, all the transcription, moving from speech to text, takes place on your computer, and you can train it with your own voice, which makes it more accurate over time. You can add your own custom vocabulary. You can create your own commands. However, it has a fairly steep learning curve, and it's also not free. It costs something. The online speech-to-text is the most common version that most people are familiar with is Siri, built into the iPhone. You're speaking, and you can also dictate into the iPhone or an iPad, and you can see that your speech appear as text. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is that the conversion of speech to text doesn't take place on the iPhone. What you're really doing is the iPhone is just a long-distance remote microphone, and it's sending your voice to a server halfway across the country where it's being transcribed, and then it's sending the text back. So the advantages of online speech to text is that, well, it's really easy to learn, and it's free, and there's no voice training necessary. However, it's going to be less accurate because you don't have an opportunity to train it to understand your personal voice as opposed to everybody else. You can't customize it with different vocabulary, and you don't actually see the text as you're dictating. You dictate it, you hit the button to say, I'm done, and then you see your text appear. All right? So it's very important to understand the difference between it. So Dragon Dictate and Naturally Speaking are standalone speech. Siri, Android and Chrome speech, dictation on iOS devices, and interestingly, also dictation on the Mac for Mac OS 10.8. Those are all online speech recognition. Okay? Windows speech recognition is an interesting in-between. It's actually standalone. It is built into the Windows operating system, so you can use it offline. It's a little less accurate than maybe Dictate or Naturally Speaking, but it's also pretty easy to get up and running. So if you have a Windows computer, that might be something you might want to explore. Right. Going to the next slide. So what about composition? Very often for students who need to organize their information visually, like Luke is here in this example, they will you'll hear recommendations of using mind mapping software, graphic organizing software, and those are all. I'm a really big fan of Inspiration Maps, and there's just so many different things you can do with it beyond just organizing your thoughts and such. But a lot of people don't have Inspiration, so what could you use other than for organizing what you're going to write? Well, you could use the outline layout that's built into Word, or show document outline that's built into Pages. But Word actually has this secret feature in it called SmartArt Graphics, and I'll show you that on the next slide. So SmartArt Graphics, and it's really easy to use those. Just hit Insert and then SmartArt Graphic. And you have a number of pre-made choices, and there's, several dozen. The graphic at the top right here shows the different categories of visual organizational relationships that you can use. such as lists, process diagrams, cycles, the typical, top-down hierarchy like an organization chart, and other visual relationships. So you have a choice between all of those, and you see from the graphic on the bottom here that it presents you with the graphic, which is organizing the ideas, but then you can open up a text pane, which is where you enter the text that goes into that graphic. So for those of you who are familiar with inspiration, it's like looking at a very simplified or limited version of an inspiration diagram side by side with an inspiration outline view. And this is built into Word, and it's a lot more limited and a lot more structured than what you'll find in Inspiration and other mind map software. However, that could be a good thing, having it much more structured and where you can't go outside the lines, so to speak. Okay, so what about spelling, grammar, and vocabulary? Let's see. In Microsoft Word, if you get those little squiggly underlines, that tell you misspelled the word, if you just right-click on the word, it will give you your options. Somebody asked, where can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? At the end of the presentation, for people who have attended here, Shannon is going to push out a handout, which is essentially a copy of the slides. So you'll get it then. So you can right-click in Word. A lot of people don't know you can do that. I mentioned for the word completion on the Mac, Escape or Option Escape. I'm going to show you a video of a special type of spell checker, which is called a contextual spell checker. I'll show you that in the next slide. You sometimes, you see the green squiggly, the red squiggly line for incorrect words, but you'll also see a green squiggly line. Just think green grammar. They both start with GR. Microsoft Word actually has a really sophisticated grammar checker inside. A lot of people get the green lines, but they don't know that they can actually set what to put the green lines under. So if you open up Preferences in Word and go down to the grammar checker, you'll find that you can set that for different writing styles. You can set it to specifically highlight passive sentences or non-agreement of verb and noun. There's several dozen options you can set. So it's really handy if you need to look for a specific writing issue that you have and you want to just have it show that. I'm going to also talk about word banks in a couple of slides here, and then finally also text-to-speech software. So we talked about text-to-speech before for reading, but text-to-speech is also a great tool for writing, especially for students who have very good verbal comprehension skills. So instead of proofreading your work, you can listen to your work. So select the text in Word or Pages or whatever you're writing in, and just have it read back to you. And it's so much easier sometimes to hear, oh my gosh, I left out a word. How could I have done that? I'll do that with, if I have an email that I have to send out that just has to be worded perfectly, I'll have the computer read it back to me, because people, and this is just everybody, has a tendency when you're looking at something you yourself have written, you have a tendency to see what you thought you wrote as opposed to what you actually wrote. So that can be, the proof listening tool can be really cool. All right. So let's see. So Ginger software, if you've heard that before, and it only works on Windows. And by the way, I'm going to pass this off as Everyday Tech only because it acts like a plug-in to Microsoft Word. So based on that, I'm going to say once you've acquired it and it's free, it's a plug-in to Word, so therefore it's Everyday Tech, all right? But it's only for Windows. If you need this capability I'm going to describe here for the Mac, I suggest you get the software Gotit, G-H-O-T-I-T for Mac. You have to pay for it, though. So anyway, it's a contextual spell checker. And a contextual spell checker, you realize that even if something is spelled absolutely horribly, you as a human being can look at that text and see the, you know, and recognize this is what I think the person was trying to say, all right? So what I'm going to do here is it's probably easier just to show this to you. And Rosemary, I'm going to go to my app sharing this time. Yes, Ginger was free, or I should say there is a free version. And you're going to have to hold tight with me here for a second. I got to do something. I got to open up QuickTime so I can run this video. So just hang tight for a second because I'm actually not looking at my own screen right now. Right. QuickTime. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to open up the Ginger movie, and I'll get back with you here in a second. So go back to Blackboard, and I'm going to hit the QuickTime player. So hopefully you should be looking at a movie on your screen. Can somebody confirm that they are seeing what appears to be a blank document in Microsoft Word?
I can see a blank document, Shelley.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to play this, and you're going to see me typing into Word, typing a horribly written sentence into Word, and I'm going to scroll through this pretty quickly so we don't have to watch the whole video, all right? So I'm writing, if I could do better at spelling, I would be able to express myself to more people. We'll all agree that's a horribly worded sentence, all right? But the point is, as a human being, you can look at that and you can say, I think I know what the person's going to say. All right, so let's look at what Ginger does with this. I click the Ginger button, and it shows me what it thinks I meant, and it's going to speak it aloud.
If I could do better at spelling, I would be able to express myself to more people.
And this is what it would sound like the way I wrote it.
If I choose to do better at spelling, I would be able to express myself to more people.
I say I like the second one better. I'll hit approve, and we have a perfectly written sentence. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and stop sharing. Go back to the whiteboard. Okay, so that is a pretty cool capability. So let's move along here. Next slide, talking about word banks. A lot of software, like word prediction software and other ones, will give you, yeah, I see your note here, Shannon. Anyway, is the word banks. It's the easiest way to create a word bank, which is to give access to whether it's transition words or vocabulary words and stuff, is to just open up a document, another Word document next to what you have. All right. So here, you can see on the side here, I have a list of transition words for time, and I just have a second Word document open up, and if I want to, I can just drag that text over into my main document. So I just have two documents open up, two Word documents at the same time. So let's move on to Leah, grade 8. I have trouble listening and taking notes at the same time. So that's a picture of Leah. And she's a very good listener, has excellent memory, but she has very slow, illegible handwriting. And although she understands well, she's very slow in processing auditory information. So in a fast-paced class or webinar like this one, it's difficult to kind of, process everything at the time. It would be really nice to be able to go back and re-listen to parts of it. All right. So we're going to look at, next slide, what we can do to reduce the amount of notes she has to take in class. Well, one thing is to have a note-taking template, copy of slides from the teacher, etc., and to have her type or essentially annotate those, the PDF of those slides just like we saw before, all right? Another one, and I'm going to go to the next slide, is to think about, this is one of the most underused note-taking tools around, a digital camera. Think about how much information is conveyed visually, and the idea of just having a camera, even in a cheap, a non-smartphone, and taking a picture of the whiteboard to refresh your memory later, or taking a picture of a lab setup, or rock specimens, or sequential pictures showing steps in a process. For a visual learner, that's going to make a lot more sense than trying to convert that into words. That's one of the most, that's my underused note-taking tool of the day. So what about the idea of supplementing your notes with an audio recording? Many of you are familiar with the LiveScribe Smart Pen, and I am going to talk about that. I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to show the video because, as Shannon has reminded me, I'm running close on time at the moment. So we'll talk about that on the next slide. And there's a number of different tools that can help you link an audio recording with either what you handwrite or what you type. And I'll explain in a couple of slides here why that's important. So if we're looking, the LiveScribe Smart Pen looks like a big fat pen. It audio records, and when you write on special microdot paper made by LiveScribe, it also captures what you handwrite. But the key point is it links the two together. So if you tap your handwritten note later, it plays back the audio from that point, what it was hearing at that moment. And if you use a strategy, you can actually leverage that capability. And I've got that strategy summarized in a couple of slides here. All right, and then of course you can upload anything you do to the computer as well. So LiveScribe, I classify that as consumer technology. You can pick it up at Best Buy, you can order it from Amazon. So that falls in the category of consumer tech. So I think that's everyday tech, all right? But that capability also exists in Microsoft Word for Mac. A lot of people don't know this. If you open up Notebook Layout View in Word 2011, a slightly different place in Word 2008 and 2004. This is only on the Mac side. You'll get this nice looking digital notebook, and it has an audio notes feature so that you can record while you're typing. And then if you click the little speaker icon that appears at the beginning of each line, if you click that speaker icon, it will play the audio from that point while you were typing. It's a really cool thing, and like I said, it's built into Microsoft Word. So people are wondering, well, gee, what about Windows? How come it's not built into Windows? Well, in Windows, they give you far more. They give you an entire separate application called OneNote. So if you buy Microsoft Office, you'll see an application in there called OneNote. And maybe some other time we'll do an entire hour-and-a-half webinar just on that because it's a really powerful tool. But it also has audio recording capabilities built into it. There are also a number of note-taking apps like AudioNote and Notability. And by the way, I just changed the slide. AudioNote and Notability that will also record along with handwriting and typing. So this page here just summarizes a good strategy for leveraging that audio recording. The goal is to listen more, write less, and target the playback. If it was difficult listening to the first time, it'll be difficult listening to the second time unless you only listen to certain parts. So I think the key is think about what are the parts that I'm going to want to go back and listen to, such as teacher says this is going to be on the test, or here's your assignment for tomorrow, or during a change of topic, or thinking about, gee, I don't understand this part, I need to go back and listen to it, or maybe just you didn't get enough sleep the night before and you zoned out for a few minutes. So you can have your own little code system or symbols you use and just mark those on the page, and that's going to tell you, well, here are the places to go back and listen to. But you've got to give it some forethought as to what are those places you want to go back to. So that's a pretty good note-taking strategy to use. All right, so how about Ben and math? I've only got one thing I want to show you for him. He doesn't want to show his work. I'm changing slides here because he feels I can do all the math in my head, and if I get the right answer, I don't have to show my work. But he's into algebra now, and he really does need to show the steps of that. But of course, writing is very laborious for him. So we're going to move on to next slide of talking about different options for math notation. Some of you may know that there's a tool built into Microsoft Word, both Mac and PC, called Equation Editor, and you can enter all sorts of symbols for writing equations, up to and including calculus, differential equations, all sorts of stuff. The problem is you can't type any of those symbols. You have to use your mouse for each one of those, and that gets kind of difficult, all right? So what I'm going to look at, I'm going to go to the next slide here, is what can we use to type math equations into Microsoft Word. And again, I'm going to pass this off as everyday tech, because once you get this software, it actually links directly with Microsoft Word. It becomes part of Microsoft Word. It's a plugin. So Equation Editor is the version that comes with Word. MathType, and the academic price for MathType is only $57, by the way, will allow you, it's the full professional version of Equation Editor, and will actually allow you to type very complex math. And I have several students who are working with this, including some with Aptoide CP and other things that are using MathType or an equivalent program called FX Equation that allow you to just type perfectly formatted math. And if you're a good typist, it can actually be a lot faster than trying to handwrite it. There are similar programs like FXGraph and FXDraw that work on both Mac and PC that allow you to type graphs and drawings as well. Okay, so finally wrapping up here. So I've got about 9 minutes left if we want to leave 10 minutes left for the question and answer. This is Hans, and Hans says, I have so many ideas and papers and things to do that I often lose track of them. So this is my standard 2-column by 3-row table here showing Hans's strengths, difficulties, and strategies. So he's very creative. He picks up concepts quickly, but his mind is constantly darting from one stimuli to another. He forgets to write stuff down. He misplaces his papers. He goes off task. And, of course, he procrastinates. The reason I say of course is I wouldn't know anything about procrastination. But anyway, so the strategies we want to use for him is how can we use technology to reduce the visual, auditory, and internal distractions that are pulling him off task? How can we increase the awareness of how he's spending his time and what are his distractors so he can make good, educated decisions about here's how I want to spend my time and here's what how I don't spend the time. I noticed a question came up about the MathType before that said, how do you type it with a keyboard? Yes, you just use a standard keyboard. So I'm changing topic here, which is interesting because I'm talking about executive function issues. But yes, you type it with a standard keyboard, and for most math functions, they're very easy to remember codes like Command E is for exponent, Command R is for root, stuff like that. Okay, back to Hans and attention again. So we want to reduce the distractions. We want to increase his awareness of what his distractions are. And we also want to help him to break his projects into manageable chunks and also see how we can incorporate movement, because movement really helps kids who need to fidget, that they use that for regulating their attention. And if they can be up and around, it actually helps their attention. So let's see what we can do. So with regard to attention and focus, let's look at removing the visual distractions on a computer. Easiest thing, a couple of very simple commands on a Mac and Windows for hiding everything but the frontmost application. You'll see in the next slide there's actually some free apps that can do even more than that, which are kind of interesting. They just fade out everything in the background. If you're reading on the web, you can use, I would look up readability.com, and it will allow you to reformat a web page on the fly so that it extracts it reformats the web page, makes it straight text, very large, changes the colors of the backgrounds, and it removes the images. Every browser also has the capability to just hide the images. And if images are distracting, especially on pages with lots of ads on them and stuff, you can actually turn off the images in a browser so you're just presented with text. The way to do that is different in each browser, but I wanted to let you know that exists. There is an extension that can be added. It's available for most browsers called AdBlock, which essentially blocks the appearance of any ad on the page. The implications of this are huge. suffice it to say that AdBlock is the all-time most downloaded extension for any browser. I wonder why. Anyway, so that takes care of the visual aspects if you're working on a computer. What about auditory distractions? Very often, the solution for auditory distractions is, well, you need to work in a quiet room with no distractions. That works for some people. It doesn't work for others. For some people, silence is more deafening than anything else. The worst thing you can do is put them in a quiet room. So you want to have like white noise, and frankly, music and headphones works perfectly well with that as long as you're using instrumental music. There are apps such as the white noise app for both computers and devices, digital devices, mobile devices. You know, the sounds of trains, planes, waves crashing, crickets chirping, anything you want. These last three that I've got up here are talking about ways to incorporate movement. So most of you are probably familiar with fidget toys. There is a tendency that you just want to fidget with stuff. There's a reason for that, actually. It helps you to regulate your attention. Standing up at a whiteboard, standing up at a stand-up work table or desk can also help. And this last idea of using a Bluetooth headset with speech recognition was actually given to me by one of my recent students. He really did much better if he was not sitting in a chair while he was thinking. So we got him hooked up with speech recognition. He's very good at it. He can speak in complete sentences. But the way he uses a Bluetooth headset connected to the computer, and he dictates while pacing back and forth in the room or wandering around a large room. And he can write so much better by doing that. So this is just a summary slide showing a couple of different utilities that you can add for a Mac or a PC that essentially dims or hides everything but the frontmost window. And it even can get rid of the taskbar in Windows or the dock in the Mac, which are sometimes some of the biggest distractors. So I think I have those listed on my website also if you want to go to the AT Tools page, AT Toolbox page on my website. All right, so time and task, and Shannon, speaking of time, I am looking at my time here. Anyway, so time and task. How do I manage the things I have to do and the time that I need to do them? Sometimes the simplest pad and paper for writing down something you need, the simplest pencil you have available to you is your voice. So if you have an app on your phone, on your smartphone, whatever, that records your voice, make a note to yourself. Of course, for that to be valuable, you have to have an end-of-the-day strategy where you actually listen to it and put stuff in a less temporary location, like put it on your calendar, put it in a time and task management app or something like that. Use of digital calendars, of course, is important. I'll show you on the next slide Assignment Calculator, which is a very interesting online it's a web resource for helping to think about how to break down large projects. Let's see, LeechBlock and Self-Control. Those are two interesting, actually LeechBlock is an extension for Firefox. Self-Control is an app, a free app for the Mac. And essentially what they do is they allow you to specifically say, don't give me access to these time-wasting websites, and do it for 45 minutes because I want to focus on something. So it kind of reduces the temptation to go to YouTube or to go to Facebook or something like that because you know you can't access it. As a matter of fact, the only way to shut it off is to restart the computer. So it just lowers the temptation level is all it does. Now, if that's still not enough, well, there's parental controls that are built into the to Mac and Windows that can be used. And then there's the use of, I'm trying to think, Time Tracker is an app that you can add to Firefox that just keeps a running total of how long have you been on the web. And it can be very illuminating to see, I can't believe I've been on the web that long. So this is Assignment Calculator. And let's see, I'm actually going to go to my own my own website rather than use WebTour here and just show this to you. And let's see, I'm going to stop, I'm going to start sharing, and I'm going to go to Safari and just show you, I've got this here somewhere. Okay, so this is actually something like that. It's called Research Project Calculator, and I can type in name of my assignment, whatever my class is, let's say math, I don't know, and I'll make it a writing assignment. You see I've put in my beginning and end dates, and I'm going to create an assignment, and it's going to tell me how to break down that task into, hold on, I didn't do that right. All right, and now create an assignment, all right. Please choose an assignment template. There we go. Good. All right. And it's going to help me break down the task and say, by this date, you need to have gotten this done. By this date, you need to have gotten this done, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting way of looking at how to break down assignments into different parts. I know I'm into the question and answer time. I will finish up quickly here. All right, so what else have we got? With regard to organization, an accordion backpack, an accordion file in the backpack, but don't organize it by let's say, class. Organize it by context. Like, everything in this part of the accordion file is what I'm going to work on tonight. This is what I'm going to give to my parents. This is what I'm going to turn in tomorrow morning. There's also a feature on both Mac and Windows called virtual folders or saved searches. So if you search for something on your computer, you can save that search. And if you happen to name all your files according to a very consistent protocol, like all your math notes start with the word algebra, you can create a folder that automatically puts into it everything that starts with the word algebra. So it's a very interesting tool. It's actually already built into the operating system. We talked a little bit about digital notebooks, and in the interest of time, I'm going to skim through this next comment. We're not going to watch the video of it very quickly. Digital notebooks such as OneNote allow you to clip information from various sources like the web and dump it into pages you've already pre-set up in your notebook. And Evernote will do the same sort of thing for people who use that service. What's cool about it is when you clip something and dump it to a page in your notebook, it retains the link back to the original source. So if you want to know where did I get this information from, that's automatically stored. You don't have to think about it. And then finally, these last two slides, and I'll leave this as an exercise, again, in the interest of time, I'll leave this as an exercise for the students. I realized as I started to put together how many different things you can add to a browser, I started to get overwhelmed. So I have a bit of a laundry list here, talking about cloud storage, bookmarking, web-based resources, just some things to think about. On the next slide, I have some interesting browser extensions to look into, so you can do that after the webinar here. And at the bottom of that page are the links for where do I find extensions for Google Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, and Safari. So those are the links you go to find some of these different links. All right. So, do you remember I talked about AdBlock before? I just thought I'd end on a humorous note. The company also puts out a for-pay ad blocking thing called CatBlock. And what CatBlock does is, hold on a minute. Okay, I'm just looking at something that appeared on my screen here. Sorry. CatBlock does the same as AdBlock, but instead of giving you no images, it replaces every ad on the page with a picture of a cat. It was started as an April Fool's joke. It turns out it has really taken off. So if you're willing to pay for it, you can get CatBlock. So lastly, let's see. Lastly, I'm going to go to, there's my contact information for anybody who has any questions later. And also, Shannon just mentioned she just pushed out today's handouts to everybody, so you all have a copy of the slides. Anybody has any questions, I'm happy to, answer emails and stuff like that. And I also have a lot of other information on the website. And now, with the 5 minutes we have left over, we'll open it up to questions and answers. And Shannon, I'll let you moderate that section.
Sure, Shelley. I think we have probably just less than 5 minutes because we have to go through a survey. But I think one question was about a web. I think I'm going to go back to the chat box just to see if something about what is your website was one of the questions.
Oh, website. Well, the website is on that previous slide. So also you can just Google me, and let's put it this way. I've got it at the bottom of every single slide. It's the copyright notice at the bottom of every slide. So it's techpotential.net. Tech Potential is short for Technology to Unlock Potential, which, as far as I'm concerned, that's what I do for a living.
Great. Okay, I think there was one question about, I think it was about what was free. I think it was mentioned at around 4:30. Was Ginger free? I'm not sure exactly.
Ginger, but without the text-to-speech function, is free. If you want the text-to-speech function, there's like a subscription charge. Got It for the Mac, which works a little bit differently, but also is a contextual spell checker. It is not free. It's a subscription-based thing also. So I think I answered that at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, just making sure that. Anything else? Any other questions?
And again, if you think of questions afterward, there's my. You've got my website, my email address, and my telephone number that's on the handout, and I'm more than happy to entertain questions. So.
All right, any questions? Okay, well, the handouts have been pushed out, and thank you so much, Shelley, for presenting. And you think of more questions, just always call her or find her on the website or email her. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to today's webinar. At the end of the webinar, there is a survey, and please complete the survey so that we can improve future webinars. And so when you exit the webinar platform, a pop-up training survey window will appear. So please, it's very short. It's like a couple of questions. Just let us know what you thought about today's webinar, and that would also help Shelley as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
All right. Have a good rest of your day and week.
Thank you.